everyone, welcome to another video. Today I want to share with you a little bit of no line coloring. I am also going to be using some brand new to me Catherine Pooler inks. Now these are now available in the Crackerbox and Suzy Stamps shop. I'll leave a link to them down below. I have two here that I got to try out. This is Bellini and the other one is Shea Butter. I'll be using Shea Butter on my card today, but these inks are gorgeous. They're really good ink pads. They come in an oval shape. The cap has the color on it so you can see exactly what you're getting. They have a foam pad inside and it is really juicy. These are dye inks, and whenever you first put them on the paper, you're going to see that these are kind of the ones that do not look that great. But as these inks dry, they kind of settle into the paper and they just lay so nicely. You can see there in the, I already tested these out a little bit that I'm going to be using today. You can see they just blend into the paper, create this really opaque color. It's gorgeous. So these also blend really well. You're going to see by the time I get done with this card, actually with my mask, I've got a gorgeous sort of blended outline. It just looks beautiful. So I'm starting off with this hay bale stamp from Crackerbox and Suzy Stamps. I've got it loaded onto an acrylic block, and I am using some Memento Rich Cocoa ink to go ahead and stamp this down, just randomly creating a background. Now I am stamping on an A2 top folding card base. I'm stamping straight on the card base, and to make sure I don't get any on the back of the card base, I went ahead and masked that off with a little bit of masking tape just on the very top there. That way everything's nice and neat, no smudges or anything on the back of the card. I'm going to go ahead and just continue to stamp this. I have sped this up a little bit. I'm turning this over, upside down, on its side, every which way, just to kind of fit this all in to the background. Now, a lot of this background is going to show, so the majority of the time when I stamp backgrounds like this, I would only stamp like the outside edges or something like that, but for this one, I'm actually going to stamp the entire card base because a lot of it is going to show. I really wanted this background to shine through. It goes with the sentiment today, so I wanted to make sure that it stood out. I have a few more little spots there where I just want to tuck in little bits and pieces to make sure everything's nice and covered and it looks cohesive. So I'll go ahead and stamp a few more, and then once that is done, it's time to move on to coloring these in. So I stamped one of those hay bales onto a piece of scrap paper. This is cardstock, and I cut that out with my craft knife. This is super easy because it is just a little kind of rectangular shape. There are not that many sides to it, and they're all straight lines, so it's really easy to cut out. I'm going to use that as my mask to go ahead and color in these hay bales with this Shea Butter ink. I'm using a mini ink blending tool. I position that mask right over the hay bales, and then I just fill this in by kind of tapping. You can blend whatever you want to do. You could even use a few colors here and really get a nice gradient effect, darker towards the outside, lighter towards the inside, however you wanted to do it, but I'm really going with one solid color here, and that is the Shea Butter. Now as I'm doing this, you can see it kind of blends on the outside of this mask as well that I've created, and once I'm done, this is gorgeous. These inks, they blend, I would say, just as good as Distress inks, which is kind of new for me. Normally the inks that I use do not blend like those. That's why I have all those separate inks for that. So this is a nice little find that we have here. I'm going to continue to fill these in. Like I said, I'm speeding it up, and I'm just filling in all of these little hay bales, turning my mask to make sure that it fits over the stamp whichever way I've stamped it, and then I just use that mini ink blending tool to go ahead and pounce in the color, blend it in however you want to say it. This is one of the quicker ways I have found to make a background and color in all the images, so that's why I like to do this, especially with these really simple shapes like this hay bale. When they're so easy to cut out with your craft knife, you can just very, very quickly fill in all these little images with some ink. I honestly like it better than probably coloring in a background. So I have one last little stamp here that I'll go ahead and fill in very quickly with that ink. It's going to look a little splotchy at first, but once it all settles down and dries, you've got these beautifully colored hay bales that are just gorgeous. So give it a little bit of time to dry before you judge this ink. Now I'm going to be doing some stamping on a 2" by 4" piece of white cardstock. I've got the Scarecrow stamp set from Crackerbox and Suzy Stamps, and I'm using Desert Sand Memento ink. This is a very, very, very light ink. I'm going to use this to stamp my outline and then do some no-line coloring. Whenever you're doing no-line coloring, you want to make sure that you have a very light ink that's going to be easily covered up with your different colors, even lighter ones. You'll have to excuse the background noise. My neighbor decided to mow right at this time, so that's fun. But anyway, I'll go ahead and stamp that little scarecrow down, and then it's time to start coloring. There you can see that very, very light image, but I can still see it enough to do some coloring. You're going to have to excuse my head. In some of this, I have to get a little bit closer to the image in order to see it, where all those little nooks and crannies are. Now, like I said, I'm going to be doing my coloring with my colored pencils. I'm using Prismacolor pencils, and I am not doing any blending out with OMS or anything like that today. I'm letting the pencils do all the work. So I'm using some black for that little bird there. And with these, you do want to be careful because these blend so easily that anytime you go in and kind of touch a color, you're going to pull it away. So make sure that your pencils are nice and sharp. I like to use, I'll leave the pencil sharpener link down in the description box below. And mine is an electric pencil sharpener, and it gets a nice sharp point on it. So that allows me to get into all of those little nooks and crannies, especially these small little areas on smaller stamped images like this. So I'm using some yellows for the hay, and these match the Shea Butter ink that I used on my other hay bales. I like to start with a darker color, outline the image, and then kind of fill in with my lighter color and blend it all together. And that really helps me create this no-line look. It's a very simple way. You can go much more in depth with this if you want to, but I like to keep mine nice and simple. For the hat, I'm going to be using this olive green. It's got a little bit of a checked pattern on it, so I'm coloring in all those little checks that have the ink on it with the color, and then the rest of them I'll go ahead and fill in with a lighter olive green color. I really don't want to do any mixing here. I just want to keep the colors nice and separate, so I tried to stay away from the edges with that. I'm also using those olives on a little bit of his shirt and also the patch on his pants. Whenever I'm doing larger areas like this, scenes, if you will, I like to carry colors all the way across the card. So I've got those yellows, those golden yellows I went ahead and put on his little vest too. I've got them in the hay, and then I've got some of them in the little beak of the bird, and I've got some on the background of the card. Then for the olives, I used it on his shirt, the patch on his pants, and his hat. Then for the jeans, I'm going to go ahead and use some darker blues. So I started off with my darkest color, and then I went ahead and filled in with my lighter color. So my darker color is going to be outlining all the parts of the jeans, all the little stitching on it, that kind of thing. And then I fill in with a lighter color, come back in with my darker color to really darken up that stitching that's in there for that fine little detail. And then it's that easy to finish off that little jean part of his pants. For the face, I'm using some darker sort of peaches, I guess you would say. They're more tans. I really want it to look like a burlap sack that his face was made out of. So I used that. I used some darker browns on his eyes and the little stitching on his mouth. And then I'm using some of those darker browns again on his little coat. So I'll bring those up into his jacket, go in with my darker color, do all the outlining, then come in and fill in with my lighter color, go back in with the darker color, do some detail work, and it's super simple. I'm also bringing those darker browns down into the dirt down below, and then I've also got a very, very dark brown that I'm going to be using on the little pole that kind of holds the scarecrow up. For his little handkerchief around his neck, I wanted to go with a red. This is almost at a brownish red. And then I'll be using those reds and oranges that I used on the card in the sunset that is behind him. So I started off with a reddish orange in the background, and then I'll go to a lighter orange, kind of blending these as I go. And finally, I'll come in with a yellow and blend in. In this part, you need to be super careful going around that bird because it's so easy to pull that black into the sunset. And then you've got kind of a brownish color and it doesn't look very pretty. So make sure that you're careful when you go around those edges. Now, once that was done, I thought about just leaving it as is, but I wanted to add a little bit of a sky to the background. So I'm using a very light blue and then an even lighter blue to kind of shade out those clouds. All I'm doing is drawing little half circles, different sizes, around the sky, and then filling in with a lighter blue underneath to blend that out. I also blended out the dirt a little bit further away to fill up that space, and that finished off the coloring. Super, super easy to do. It looks complicated, but I promise it just takes a couple minutes of practicing and it's easy enough to get done. Now I wanted to finish off the inside of the card, so I did the same exact thing I did on the outside. I stamped the hay bale, and then I filled in the color with some Shea Butter Catherine Pooler ink. I used the rich cocoa to do the stamping on the outside. There you can see that gorgeous sort of blend I have going on that mask. I wish the card had that on it. It's gorgeous. And then on the front of that, I matted my little colored image. I stamped hay, which is the hay sentiment from Crackerbox and Suzy Stamps. I love that. It's so cute. It goes with the background. And I stamped that with the rich cocoa ink, matted with the craft cardstock for that panel. And then I'm going to add some brown drops, enamel accents to be, these are potting soil enamel accents to be exact. They do not make these anymore. You can get Nouveau drops that are brown in color, so I will leave those linked down in the description box below. I just wish they had so many more colors of enamel accents. I really like enamel accents a little bit more than I like the Nouveau drops, I have to say. They're a little bit more runny, and so they flatten out a little bit easier for me, but they don't make those anymore, so I will leave the Nouveau drops in the brown color down below. Now I went a little overboard with adding these around the card background, but I love these, and I think they just add a little bit more to that very simple background and very simple card. So I added a few more drops here and there to really fill in all those white spaces, and once that was done, that finished off the card. This was a majority of it was making the background and then coloring in the image. Stamp your sentiment and you've got a gorgeous card ready to go. Here's one final look at it. And now that you see a closer look at that ink, now that it's dry, you can see just how much it settles down and kind of levels itself out. There's no more splotchiness at all. Like I said, some of those inks really kind of do scare me when I first put them down, but they're gorgeous once they're dry. Thank you guys so much for watching today. There are going to be links on the left side of your screen that you can click on. There's a few videos over there if you want to watch them, and also you can subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. If you like this video, you can leave a thumbs up down below. Thank you guys for watching again, and happy crafting.